Good morning, everyone. Hello, and welcome to the IFST webinar, Supporting Your Food Safety Culture, How Specialty Lubricants Can Help, sponsored by Klüber Lubrication. Klüber Lubrication has been helping food manufacturers to run efficient production processes for more than 9 decades through the development and supply of specialty lubricants, which increase productivity, reduce maintenance tasks, and achieve higher food safety standards. My name's Deborah Kendale, and I'm the Business Development Director at IFST. I've worked in industry as a food safety specialist and auditor, and I now have been with IFST for around 2.5 years and developed new business opportunities alongside managing the marketing and communications and events team. Today's webinar will introduce the requirements for lubricants to meet the requirements for compliance with international food laws and standards, production reliability of world-class lubricants, and how to ensure optimum performance on your production line. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to IFST's webinar hub. Please feel free to make comments and ask questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A function, which should be at the bottom of your screen. This can also be used in the case of any technical difficulties. You can upvote other people's questions by clicking the like button next to their question. There will be a Q&A session after the presentation where we will respond to as many questions as possible. Our speakers today are Estelle Robinson and Felix Schulze. Estelle is responsible for business development across the food and beverage industry, as well as being the key account manager for international accounts such as Nestle, Coca-Cola, Princes, and Britvic. Prior to working for Klüber Lubrication, Estelle gained an HNC in applied chemistry and worked in commercial laboratories, both in water management and aviation. Felix is the Market Development Manager in the Global Industry team based in Munich. Felix is responsible for recognizing market trends and pain points of the industry, developing tailor-made solutions in close cooperation with leading food companies and OEMs, and multiplying sustainable success stories within his global field of responsibilities. For more information on their biographies, please look on the IFST website. So with that, I will hand over to you, Felix.
Thank you very much, Deborah, and good morning, everybody from Munich. I will share my screen quickly, and then Estelle will give you some insights about our company.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending this webinar, much appreciated. So we'd like to discuss with you how specialty lubricants can help support your food safety culture. Let's go to the next screen, please, Felix. So it's myself presenting this morning. So I look after the food and beverage market in the UK, and Felix, my colleague, will also be presenting, who is part of our global industry team, is based in Munich. So we just wanted to give you a quick overview of Klüber and what we do. We're founded by Theodor Klüber in Munich in Germany, and we've been manufacturing, supplying, developing lubricants for over 90 years. Now, whilst we supply all industries, we'll do aviation, automotive, wind, etc., the food and beverage industries are a key area for us, and something that we put a lot of focus onto. So we have over 2,000 specialty lubricants and services, a global company. So wherever you are in the world, we have, if we don't have a production site there, we'll certainly have a sales office to support you. With 205 employees in research and development alone, we've put a big emphasis and a lot of resource into R&D. We have our own unique lab area with more than 110 test rigs. So our products are well and truly tested and proven before we'll introduce them to the market. With regards to supplying into food and beverage, our products are 100% compliant. Compliance is, I mean, especially these days, is extremely important. But also we work with OEMs. We have thousands of OEM recommendations. To support all that, we have the relevant quality management, accreditations, environmental protection, workplace safety, and we have 6 ISO 21469 accredited sites around the world. That is the most stringent requirements for the manufacture of food safe lubricants. So also as well, we have a lot of our products carry halal and kosher approval as well. So we've been part of the global technology company Freudenberg since 1966, and we've been supplying in the UK since 1972. So our aim is to supply lubricants into the food and beverage industry, not just to supply H1 lubricants, but also to support in how they're handled, how they're applied, offer technical support as well to ensure that our customers are not just compliant 100%, but they're also producing most efficiently as possible, with sustainability goals in mind as well. So that's a quick background to Klüber. Myself, I'm going to hand over to Felix now, and I'll come back later in the presentation to discuss what we can do practically on a practical level with regards to supporting your food safety culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Estelle, for this nice introduction to our company. And yeah, as I said, I'm sitting in Munich at the headquarters from Klüber Lubrication, and with the requirements to be met by lubricants used in the food industry, I would like to guide you through our agenda today. So of course, a lubricant has to be compliant with all international food laws and internal standards. I will tell you something about this. After this, what could be interesting for you for your increasing your production reliability, Estelle will talk about. And on top of it, hopefully we can increase also the performance of your plants by using the right lubricants. And I will introduce you to a program which is called energy efficiency by using the right lubricant. Okay, we start with compliance, what has to be met for the lubricants. So on this slide, you see a rough overview about laws, registrations, and standards which are valid for using the right lubricants. It is not complete, but the most important one are shown there. We will go through some of them, and the most important, I will explain you what is behind it, and I will also tell you some recent stories what are in the news and might be interesting for you. Let's start with the National Sanitation Foundation, which is responsible for the registration of the lubricant as a non-food compound, because it shouldn't be in the end product what you're producing, and for this it's necessary to register it. We have several authorities around the world which are able to register food-grade lubricants. The most common one is NSF, the National Sanitation Foundation, but there are other players like 2Property from Scandinavia, sorry, you might heard about. Klüber, we are only working with NSF, but remember there could be others which can register food-grade lubricants. We implemented also the links which you can see on the slides. When you click there, you will get an overview about all food-grade lubricants which are available on the market. It's open for everybody. Everybody can see it, and it could be for your interest. Yeah, but what is actually a food-grade lubricant? I think you might heard about it, and I will explain you the differentiation between all the registrations and what is behind it. So the most common one is the H1 lubricant. It's the lubricant which is used with technical unavoidable food contact. What does it mean? I will explain in a minute. We have H2 as well for lubricants without food contact. We have 3H, which are the release agents with direct food contact. We have HT1. This is the heat carrier fluid with a technical unavoidable food contact. Then we have the K1s, which are the cleaners. And there is another one too, with another 3, it is H3. These are the edible oils used to prevent rust and to clean the equipment during the storage. But please be careful. This has to be cleaned off before using the equipment again. And then we have two other categories. It is HX1 and HTX1, which are important for us as a lubricant supplier, because these are the improved ingredients for use in a H1 lubricant or in an HT1 heat transfer oil. So what is very interesting, in my opinion, is what does H1 means and what are the limits of lubricants allowed in the food? You can see it here on the bottom. We are talking about parts per million. This means you have to be really careful with your lubrication management. You see, it's 10 parts per million of mineral oil or PAO in your final good. It is 10 parts per million of polyglycol and 1 ppm of silicone oil. And this is a very important point for today. H1 does not mean you can eat or drink your lubricant. It's a chemical hazard, and so it has to be avoided anyway in your final good. And when you find it in your final good, you have to change something about your process. And there, the lubrication supplier can support you. How do we register our products at NSF? So we have to send our raw material list to the FDA, and the FDA has a positive list what could be in an H1 registered lubricant. Then they're checking also the manufacturing process of the lubricant. We get the NSF check, and afterwards the registration, what you can find on the internet page, what I said before. It is not a secret, everybody can have it. And this is how we work with the NSF. Then you have the HACCP concept. I'm pretty sure you're very familiar with that, this hazard analysis critical control point concept, which is an international recognized method of identifying and managing food safety related risk. And a lubricant supplier can really support you in this HACCP concept in direction to lubricants. By using this management system, you make sure that you really do everything to secure your food safety in your production plant. We are not only searching for biological or physical hazards, but also chemicals along the whole supply chain from the raw material production to your finished good. And for this chemical hazards, we as a lubricant supplier, or better to say every lubricant supplier, can support you in this. We distinguish between three critical points or three risk points from A to C. The risk point A, it's a point where you have a technical unavoidable product contamination. Or for this, an H1 lubricant is strongly recommended. I say strongly recommended because it's not required by law, but it is required by law that you secure your food safety of your end product. And that's why we strongly recommend to use H1 in a risk point A. At the risk point B, the product contamination is possible. Also, please use H1 lubricant to secure your food safety and to if you have a contamination. And then we have the third point. It is the risk point C, where a product contamination is absolutely impossible. The HACCP concept says, okay, H2 is enough, but we as a lubricant supplier, we again strongly recommend please use an H1 as well, because you have all your guys working in your plant, and people make mistakes when taking the wrong lubricant, for example, from the warehouse. Imagine they use an H2 at the point where they should use H1. That's why we strongly recommend to use H1 lubricants around your whole production facility. Then we have other requirements like the religious one. You might know the halal certificate and also the kosher, which are according to Islamic law for halal and for the Jewish law like kosher. We as a lubricant supplier have to follow the same rules like you in your production facility to have the halal and kosher certificate. We are certified once a year by a rabbi or other authorities, and to use a lubricant with a halal and a kosher certificate, you can be sure that we follow all the rules that you also can get your halal and kosher certificate for your clients. Here we can see a comparison between two standards, one for you as a food manufacturer, the Food Safety System Certification 22000, and the ISO 21469 for us as a lubricant manufacturer. Actually, I think it's a good overview that we are following almost the same standards like you. You have to formalize your HACCP system in your facility from the whole supply chain, from farm to fork, we call it in Klüber. And we know that the action is downwards from the board necessary. So it's really a commitment that you are following all the standards and rules. And we have the same with our ISO 21469. Our production plants are annual audited by the authorities that we can get our product certification for an H1 registered lubricant. It's necessary to produce it in an ISO 21469 production plant. It's not only applicable for the food industry, but also for cosmetics, medicine, and for animal field as well. Coming back to this overview slide, you see all of it is written in white, but one term is written in gray. You can see it here. Mosh and more, what was recently in the news and could be also a topic for you as a food supplier. 2 years ago, Foodwatch, which is a non-governmental organization, tested 150 food products and find in 12% of them some more. I will come in a minute what means more. And in almost all of them, they found mosh. And actually, these two substances are out of mineral oil. And this means, oh, there's some mineral oil in our end product. Where does it come from? And the tricky part right now is there are no clear limits yet. The EU Commission defined limits, but they are not legally binding because it is very hard to measure them. It is very hard to found them. And I will explain now what is behind the story. So MOSH and more, mineral oil hydrocarbons. MOSH is the saturated hydrocarbons and more the mineral oil aromatic hydrocarbons, which, as the word already say, seems to come out of oil. And of course, you think, where does my product has a contact to oil? Yes, with lubricants. And yes, I agree with that because I am a lubricant supplier. And now I would like to show you how we, as a lubricant supplier, can support you in avoiding the risk of contamination by MOSH and more. Because MOSH and more is not only coming from the lubricant, it can come and migrate into your product along the whole value chain. Here you can see the slide, from your raw material to your final product, and you have different production steps. For example, look at the field for the harvesting plants. It can be already in contamination by this MOSH and more. Also, the storage or the transportation. You have processing stage in your facilities. You have the packaging and also the distribution, and also in the supermarkets for the food trade. There can be. It can come out the contamination from different sources, like processing aids, like insecticides, and this can migrate into your final product. So what I wanted to say with that, it's not only the lubricant what might be a risk, but other reasons. And in my opinion, we as a lubricant supplier are not the problem, but we can support you strongly in your MOSH and more management by supplying a tailor-made solution to avoid the risk of contamination, at least by the lubricant. We as Klüber, we have the same problem. We also get some raw materials, produce our products, and produce our final products. And as we have the same product problems, we also can find some mosh and more in our product. But nevertheless, we would like to deliver this tailor-made solution for your application to prevent you by a risk of contamination. On the next slide, you can see, examples where this mosh and more can come from. You can read it afterwards when you will receive the presentation. Yes. Okay, so this was the compliance topic behind, but how it looks like in practical. And there, Estelle will tell you in a minute about the world-class lubrication, because we showed you how we as a lubricant supplier can support you in all the compliance work, but we also can deliver some trainings, etc., some activities. And Estelle, now it's your turn again.
Thank you, Felix. Okay, so Felix has given an overview of the kind of compliance requirements, where the various kind of registrations come from, etc. But on a practical level, what is it that you can do as an organisation to ensure that you are operating compliantly, you are operating efficiently, but you are kind of supporting and embracing that food safety culture? So when it comes to talking to your lubricant supplier, you kind of start with a structural assessment. This could be like a snapshot of where your organisation is. You can look at all sorts, not just lubrication, but it's handling, storage, your training, what training you have in place, where your personnel are, etc. It's quite a wide reaching overview of where you are. The next part is mapping and scheduling. So this is where you carry out a lubrication survey. You will have mapped all your assets and every single lubrication point on site. From there, you can start to look at standardization and rationalization. So often we'll go into a site and go, we've got 10 greases that will do the job of one grease. Nobody wants to have loads of products on site. It increases the possibility of contamination, cross-contamination, and confusion. So you want to have the lubricants on site that you're going to use and that are appropriate for the jobs that you have. A really important part is training and development. So it's important that your staff know what they're doing and that they understand why they're doing it around lubrication. So many people see it as a bit of old oil or grease. Well, actually, there's a lot of chemistry, there's a lot of research development, and kind of product development within this area. So it's important that they understand what they're doing. And also, we've had, say, in the last couple of years, certainly, an increased request for training because it's been pulled up in an audit. That lubrication knowledge on site is actually now seems to be something that auditors are looking for. Visual management and control. So this is where you can introduce a colour coding system. Again, something we put in place to try and reduce the risk of cross-contamination, make lubrication easier. Optimization. Can the lubrication task be made easier? Is there an area that isn't lubricated because it's a pain to get to? So we can look at things like that as well. And last of all, continuous improvement. So the best, I find anyway from my customer visits, the most successful lubrication management programs are where the organisation takes ownership of it and see it as something that is a continual program. So you want to make sure that your lubrication surveys are up to date. If you have new assets on site, they need adding into it. If you have new personnel coming on site, they need training, they need to understand what they're doing. Something particularly pertinent at the moment, certainly since Brexit and after COVID, there's a lot of staff, new staff kind of movement now, new people coming onto site, people leaving for various reasons. So we find that is something certainly at the minute that is ongoing. So for your next slide, please, Felix. So structural surveys, kind of step one, might not be something you want to do, but it's quite useful as it gives you a snapshot of where you are. So it could be look at all different aspects. It could be visual management, it could be what procedures and guidelines you have in place. How are you handling and managing those lubricants? It might be that the assessment at the end of that shows that actually 80% and above, you're already operating best practice, you're doing really well. You've got a great lubrication management program in place. It could be that it's looking a bit chaotic, less than 20%, not necessarily the end of the world, because there are some really easy quick fixes you can put in place that will improve that really quickly. But most sites are generally somewhere in the middle. So there's improvements that can be made for sure. Some of these improvements are really quick, some could be a long-term project. But that's quite a useful, overview, just to give you an idea of where you are. Next slide, please, Felix. Now, this mapping and scheduling, this is the absolute bedrock. I think, to me personally, I think this is the most important aspect of any lubrication management program. This is where you have a lubrication survey carried out by your lubrication supplier. They will go through your site from, go back a slide, please, Felix.
I'm sorry.
There we go. So we'll survey the site from beginning to end following the direction of production. Every asset on site will be logged, the lubrication reference, where it is, lubrication point description, the recommended product confirms that it's NSF-H1, how often you need to lubricate that particular piece of equipment, and by what method. This, is your absolute foundation. It's a really important stage that needs to be carried out. Okay, Felix, we can go on to the next slide. At the end of that, you will have a list of recommended products. It's like it's a summary of what you have on site. We will also have gone through a standardization process. So as I referred to earlier, you might have 7, 8 greases, as your site grease, but actually you just need one. It's important that each, it's not unusual for us to be given a list of lubricants by a current supplier and go, right, can you match those? That's all well and good, but you're not necessarily using the correct lubricant for that particular application. That's an important process to go through, and that's what your survey does. And at the end of it, then you know that those are the products that you need on site, those are the products that you need to store, look after, apply a colour coding system to if you want to, but it keeps everything neat and tidy. Okay, Felix, next slide. When it comes to making recommendations on that survey, the recommendations are done primarily by OEM recommendation. So you know that if you've got warranties in place, you're not going to invalidate those warranties, that we've worked with the OEMs, these are the best products and the ones that are recommended for that particular application. And next slide, please. So as I referred to earlier, it's all well and good kind of buying your H1 lubricants and putting your lubrication management in place, but your staff need to know what they're using, why they're using it, how they're using it, and it's at all levels. So operators, engineers, there's certainly more recently, it's kind of a common practice now for the everyday tasks, the easier tasks that are actually done now by the operators. So they need to know, they just want their machine up and running, they just want to come in, get on with it and know it's not going to break down. So if they're doing those everyday tasks, those tasks are really important. They need to understand why they're doing it, need to understand how to handle those products. Just because they're H1 doesn't mean you can eat or drink them. Always bear in mind the maximum permissible contamination limit you have is 10 parts per million. That's tiny. It's incidental contact. So they need to understand health and safety and why we use different lubricants for different tasks. Engineers, so we do some of the more complex tasks, and they can be trained to understand a bit more some of the chemistry that goes on into the formulation of lubricants. Again, the types of different lubricants, whether they're the kind of synthetics, why we use greases over oils, etc., and the kind of additives that go into the lubricants and why they're there. And something that I promote with all my customers is train the trainer. So this is, more in-depth training. It might be when you take ownership of your lubrication management, it might be that you nominate a couple of lubrication champions, that they have a specific responsibility to look after the lubrication on the plant. You could put those through some more in-depth training. And the beauty of that is that when they have that training, they are then equipped with the knowledge to pass that training in-house. So they can train your engineers, they can train your operators. So you don't have to keep pulling your lubrication supplier back out at additional cost to carry out this training. You can do it in-house. It's all about taking ownership. Okay, next slide, please, Felix. So you've trained your staff, you've had your lubrication survey carried out, you've done your structural survey, you know where you are. So this is where you kind of apply a colour scheme. Now, a colour scheme it's all about making lubrication as foolproof as possible. The only limitation with the colour scheme, it tends to be limited by the colours available with your lubrication handling equipment, so your grease skins, your jugs, etc. And it tends to be a limit of 10 colours. Okay, but that still gives you 20 products, because you can have one colour. So if we look at blue, for example, you've got an oil product assigned to it on the left, you've got a grease product assigned to it on the right. It's very difficult to put oil into a grease nipple or to fill an oil jug, with grease. So with the difference in nature of the two products, it then gives you 20 products on that colour scheme that you can use. And we do have sites, some of the larger sites that do use it all. You might then want to roll your colour scheme, kind of across the plant. So you can have it in your storage areas, you can have it in your lubrication storage areas, but you can label around the site, you can label all the lubrication points. Now think about what you want and what you can have on that label. You can have your own kind of company logo, you've got your product name there, but also you could state that it's NSF, H1. And you can look at that label there and it's clearly a grease. Now auditors like to see this, it tells them straight away what's being used, where it's being used and where it relates to with regards to your colour scheme. You can put different symbols on there. You can put, it's clear that it's going to be a spray or a paste or an oil. So things you can do to put in place. You can introduce mapping as well, mapping documents that will relate to the labelling and to your colour scheme. Okay, next slide, please. Storage and handling. As you can see there, the colour scheme applies again. So if they know that they've got a red label by a grease point, it's going to be that specific grease gun. You can have the grease gun in red, you can have the, where it sits coloured appropriately as well, and then it relates to the label by the grease point. You can have sideline cabinets, so they're there, all the greases and oils needed for that particular line, you can have in a cupboard on the shop floor next to the line, so everything is nice and easy to use. We find that people get lazy if they've got to trip trap back to the stores every time they need to get another grease cartridge or another spray. So think about what you want in your line side cabinet and make things nice and easy and convenient. Outdoor stores as well, bunded, colour coded, everything you need in there. It just makes life nice and simple. So why do we even look at storage and handling? Well, it's about minimising risk, reducing cross contamination. You want to support those reliability improvements that you've put in place. You don't want lubrication related failures. You want to make it as easy as possible for people to lubricate those machines. Maintain compliance. This is something auditors always want to see. You think about in your outdoor store, your rain storage area, keep your compliance folder there. So you have all your certificates in there, all your quality certificates, as well as your product information, your technical information, safety information for all those products. And think about having a digital copy as well. You can speak to your lubrication supplier about that because you want it all easy to hand. So when your auditors come along, you're not panicking looking for stuff. It's all there, good to go. And really important is just to reduce cross contamination. Okay, next slide, please. Now, believe it or not, we're not here to sell you as much lubricant as humanly possible. We want you using the correct lubricants with the correct quantity, the correct application. And by default, then you'll be operating efficiently and in a more sustainable manner. If you have the right lubricants, you reduce waste, you reduce downtime of the machine, you extend your components life. What's not to like? What's not to love about it? So when we come to optimization, we want to ensure that all lubrication points are attended to. Sometimes you have to stop the machine, so people don't do it. They haven't got time, they haven't got the downtime. Could be behind a cage. It's just awkward to get to. Think about piping out. Anything to make it simpler. It could be, a malting site where the lubrication points are outside and 5 floors up. Nobody wants to be out there on a cold, wet, windy February afternoon. To think about employing automatic lubrication. So we'll go over it. So at the same time as your lubrication survey is done, your lubrication supplier can be looking at optimization potential. How can we make that task simpler? Can we get you lubricating on the run? Can we shorten the time required to carry out that lubrication task? At the lubrication, are they restricted? Can we pipe out? Can we employ automatic lubricators? What can we do? Something simple like a sight glass. to just keep an eye on the oil level. It encourages, reliable lubrication practices, reduces the number of tasks. Where possible, we want you lubricating on the run. You've then got increased engineer availability, so they can be off doing other tasks. You want machine down for as short a time as possible. Improve safety as well. If you can automate it, it's behind a cage or whatever, and you don't have to worry about it, so much easier. And all about equipment reliability. Nobody wants those machines down. The cost of that can rack up to thousands in the blink of an eye. So that old saying is that we want the right product with the right amount at the right time, in the right place, and delivered in the right way. It's not enough to just buy H1 lubricants and go, yeah, we're good to go, we're sorted. It's all about how you manage those lubricants as well. Okay, next slide, please, Felix. So something you might want to consider for your larger assets on site is routine condition monitoring. So many times the large gearboxes could be on a planned maintenance, and you'll change the oil automatically, after maybe 2 years, 3 years. The modern synthetics now can go, significantly longer. So if you carry out regular analysis, it might be that you can get another 12 months, 2 years out of that lubricant, saving you money, reducing your waste. But like with everything else, you want to make it as easy as possible. Sight glass is easy, but you can get sight glasses that act as sampling points as well. Sampling methods, how a product is sampled is really important. So you need to think as well, when we talked about training earlier, think about this as well, how to take a sample, how to make sure it's a representative sample. And also when the report comes through, your staff need to be able to understand the results and what it is that, the analysis is telling them. It's usually pretty clear. They'll usually use a colour-coded system. It's all green, it's fine and dandy. But it's important to understand why it's done. And it's not just oils, you can do it with greases as well, but why it's done, and then it's done regularly. So you can create historical data. So then you can start to predict, you get trends. You can also start to predict when you're going to need to change that oil or grease. Next slide, please, Felix. So continuous improvement, as I said, those that take ownership work the best when it comes to a robust lubrication management program. It's painful for us to see that they'll get us in and we'll put it all in place, and then nothing happens and lubrication slides by the wayside. So it's important to think about continuous improvement. Employ those optimization recommendations. Ensure your survey is up to date. It's really important. If you have new assets coming in or you make changes to existing assets, you need to inform your lubrication supplier so the survey can be amended as appropriate. Use the condition monitoring analysis. Then you can extend your drain intervals and get the most out of your lubricant. And work with your lubricant supplier to illustrate efficiency and savings over time. Sometimes it can be difficult to see, difficult to monetize what it is you're saving, where you're, making your efficiencies. If you talk to your lubricant supplier, give them some estimated figures of what that failure downtime has cost you, and we will happily put things into a report and monetize it for you. When it comes to bringing new assets on site, talk to the OEM. Are they happy? You pay a fortune for assets. You can say to your assets, your OEM, that actually this is, for example, it's a Klüber site. We want that asset to come to site with Klüber lubricants in it. It's TPM ready. It's good to go. These are things that can be done. And maintain a clear procurement pathway. So once you've bought a lubricant supply, you've changed it all, you've reduced your 10 greases down to 3. It's very easy, especially if you have third-party procurement people on site that go, well, I need a grease for X, Y, and Z, and they'll go and get the cheapest. And then you've got new products creeping onto site again, and before you know it, you're back up to 10 greases when 3 greases will do the job. Also, if you have third parties on site, it's really important to maintain a direct relationship with your lubricant supplier. For our customers, we have a lubricant manufacturer. We're the ones with the expertise with these products. So it's really important. It's quite easy if you have a third party on site to go, yeah, they'll look after it all now. They buy it all. We'll just say what we need and that's it, sorted. But when you have a failure, when you have an issue that's not quite right or something isn't going to plan, you need to be talking to your lubricant supplier directly. Keep on top of your training refreshers, new starters, and operate. Once you have your lubrication management program in place, it's audit ready. So continue that. remain audit ready. So you're not in a panic every time you've got an audit coming in or auditors that are due on site. It should be the norm, you know, to operate in this way should be absolutely everyday practice and the norm. Okay, so there's some ideas of a few things you could do practically that ensures you're operating in a compliant way, a safe way, an efficient way, and it will help to maintain that food safety culture. So I'll hand you back over to Felix for the last couple of slides.
Thank you, Estelle, for this very practical insights in a production plant. Because of the ongoing time, I will now show you a short overview with figures what Estelle just described by using a high-performance synthetic oil next to the food safety. You also have some savings. We can here see a slide with the energy consumption of of some machines. Before using the high performance lubricant, I'm sorry, you have a very high energy consumption. And then after changing to a high performance lubricant, you see your energy consumption is decreasing dramatically. And we can show it with an example. You have a refrigeration compressor. I'm sure a lot of guys watching us today has also refrigeration compressors in their facility. It's one of the most important machine. It's running 24/7. And yeah, you can see here, they had to change the oil every 8,000 hours. They had a high working temperature and a high energy consumption. And when implementing a right lubrication management system, you can see different advantages next to the food safety. You increase your oil change interval to 40,000 hours, which is more than 5 times longer. You reduce your energy consumption by 7%, and this is equivalent to a payback time within 3 months. And it's not only applicable for refrigeration compressors, but also other machines which you can find in your facilities, like air compressors, great or big gearboxes, extruders, and homogenizers. I'm sure you find also your facility in this overview. Good, thank you very much for listening to our webinar today. And now we're looking forward to receive some questions. Let me check if we already had some.
So thank you very much for your presentations, Felix and Estelle. And we're now moving on to the Q&A session. There are a couple of questions in the box, but if you do have questions, please type them in at the Q&A box that you have at the bottom of your screen. So you can submit your questions using the Q&A function, and you may need to hover over your screen if you're using a mouse or touch your screen. You can also upvote other people's questions by clicking the like button next to the question. So you can see Felix and Estelle's contact details. A couple of you have asked for Felix's slides. Maybe you can email him directly. But we will be sending out a recording of the webinar in any case. So yes, we will send out a recording within 7 days. And before you leave, when the webinar ends, we would very much appreciate if you could fill out the short survey that will launch at the end of the webinar. So moving on to our first question. Are there any food safety risks when using food grade lubricants? You mentioned the ppm levels, but are there specific food safety risks?
I don't know if Felix wants to say anything about that one. Just briefly, 3H lubricants, so they're the release agents with the food contact. This relates to the Mosh-Mower subject that Felix was talking about earlier, that at the moment, 3H lubricants are, kind of used as a release agent with direct food contact. They tend to use pharmaceutical grade white oils. There may be restrictions on these in the upcoming kind of months, next couple of years, because of Mosh-Mower potential contamination. Felix, you might want to add a bit more on that.
No, it's fully what I also wanted to say. There are some developments in the market which, yeah, for vegetable oils, for example, instead of 3H, this could be a trend in the future time where you avoid this risk. But for now, I fully agree with your answer, with your reply, Mr.
Thank you both for that. And just going back to your presentation, Felix, you mentioned the ppm levels on contaminants like polyglycol. Which organization established the limits for those lubricants?
So actually, yeah, they are working close with the NSF and the FDA, but of course these limits are reviewed regularly because we are also improving ourselves, or everybody is improving himself. So we try to avoid or lower these barriers, of course.
Okay.
It's back in the 1960s that the US government brought in constraints on lubricants used by food producers. It all kind of originated some time ago.
Okay, and just as a supplementary, I mean, have you noticed any differences between the EU and the UK post-Brexit, or are we still adhering to the more international standards?
I think it's safe to say we're doing to the more international standards, but Felix, would you want to comment on that?
Yes, we have the global view, or try to have the global view. So we try to follow them, yes.
Okay, and then somebody else has asked, are there contamination limitations using 3H lubricants?
So this is the direction what Estelle just mentioned before. No, we don't have real limitations, but you have the risk of the contamination by mosh and more, for example. So there has to be more than this limit in attention.
Okay, and then someone else has asked, would it be a major food safety issue if there'd been a mistake on using a different lubricant from an intended grade?
So yes, it's we try to deliver the right lubricant for the right application, what Estelle just mentioned, right? And imagine you use a wrong lubricant for the wrong machine, you can risk a big failure, or even completely loss of this machine. So yes, it could be a big risk for the food, but also for your production in general.
Okay, and then somebody has asked, is Klüber currently doing any research on potential naturally sourced food grade lubricants?
Yes, we are doing this right now. We have already some lubricants for the marine industry, for example, which are biodegradable, but we don't have an H1 registered biodegradable lubricant yet, but we're right now developing it, yes.
Is it worth mentioning as well that with regards to the mosh mower issue, we have now a range of vegetable-based lubricants for direct food contact?
Yeah. Yes, and we're selling them not like lubricants, but they are food processing aids. So you can use them for 40C, for direct contact. Yes, it's one of our new products in the portfolio. Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a positive development. And then somebody's asked, would a lubricant survey look at the condition of seals or other foods or other systems to prevent lubricant cross-contamination into food?
So yeah, a lubricant technician would be on site and spend, depending on the size of the site, could be anything from 1 day to 5 days. And we'll go through all lubrication points with a fine-tooth comb. As part of that process, they will be asking about pain points. Now, if seals are a pain point, you'd absolutely discuss that with the technician. Some lubricants are not compatible with certain seal materials. So as part of your lubrication survey, if you've got if you've got an issue with seals, you've got a potential issue for cross-contamination, then that's the time to talk about it. But the technician is on site carrying out the lubrication survey. So yeah, it's certainly something that we'll be prepared to look at.
Okay. And then somebody else has asked, there seems to be a high emphasis on color coding as one of the control measures. Can you please share experience to why you
why we're doing it? I think why we're doing it. It's not compulsory to have a color coded system in place, but when it comes to auditing, staying food compliant, reducing cross contamination, it's a good practice to have. A lot of food companies now adopt it, and a lot of food companies now will use H1 lubricants across site. There used to be a kind of train of thought that you could use food grade above the line, non-food grade below the line. A lot of companies now just don't want any risk of contamination, so they will just use H1 across site. And the point that like I said, the colour coded system, it's not mandatory, it's not something you have to have, but I would say probably 85–90% of food manufacturers now employ this system because they just do not want cross-contamination. And also it's something that auditors look on very positively, and we all want to keep the auditors happy.
Thank you, Estelle. And then somebody else has asked, do you think there's a potential market for food grade lubricants in small businesses?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think if small businesses are operating within the food and beverage sector, it's best practice to be using food grade lubricants. It doesn't matter how big or small the company is, you need to be using food grade.
I suppose it's down to the as you say, the management system as well. It's not just the lubricant, it's how you apply and manage your lubricant.
Yeah, and a small business, you start as you mean to go on. You start out compliant. The cross contamination, it's not worth the risk. Bearing in mind that limit you've got is 10 parts per million. It's tiny. When they say incidental food contact, they do mean incidental. It's absolutely tiny. And if you have got contamination, it's not just enough to have the H1 lubricant. You've got to look at how it's been applied, how it's been handled, why is contamination there. It's a much bigger picture. To operate efficiently, make savings. It's not going to be, you're not going to achieve that by just looking at the pence per litre kilo of the product. It needs to be suitable for the application, applied in the right way, the right amount, etc. You've got to look at the whole picture. So for smaller businesses, new businesses, you start as you mean to go on.
Okay, and then somebody's asked, are the lubricants allergen free?
Yeah, and the question is written, are all of them? For all of them, I'm not quite sure, but we can deliver for some of them. You will get a document that it's allergen free. So we have to check it case by case.
So with all your lubricants, I referred to a compliance folder earlier, that your lubrication supplier should supply a compliance folder. So that's all your quality documentation, which includes your allergen statements. And that should be kept close to your lubricant store. Also keep a digital copy as well. So you have the statements and the paperwork there to hand. So you know that your products are allergen free, they're halal, kosher compliant, etc., etc. All that documentation should be stored together.
Okay, thanks, Estelle. And I've got a final question. You talked about the training programs. Do you have training programs that people can adopt, or do you suggest that people build their own training programs?
Well, training programs initially should come from your lubricant supplier. They can be delivered on site, but with regards to kind of training in-house, if you adopt or you nominate a couple of lubrication champions to go through, train the trainer, so an in-depth training session usually lasts a day, then you can roll out that training in-house. So you're then equipped, or those people are equipped with the knowledge to train the engineers and the operators. So that's something I always promote, is nominate a lubrication champion or 2 or 3, put them through the lubrication training with the lubricant supplier, and then they can roll out that training in-house. And of course, lubricant supply, you have a good relationship with them. We're always on hand to answer any additional questions.
Thank you. Thanks, Estelle. Well, I'm keeping an eye on the time. We've really got just a couple of minutes left, so I think I'm going to close now.
Can I just pick up? There's just one last question.
Yeah, sure.
Really quick one. Do you think that naturally sourced food grade lubricants would be more economically efficient and sustainable? it's a nice idea, but what we have to remember about lubricants is that they have additives in them, things that you know, ensure that they reduce friction, that they reduce corrosion, that they, you know, they have a job to do. To just use, you know, things like vegetable products or vegetable raw materials, or, you know, natural raw materials, we haven't necessarily got those additives. We've got to add them in. So it's a bigger picture. It's a more complex, quite a complicated question, really. Whilst we'll go down that road as much as humanly possible, I think there will always be a limit with regards to the additives and some of the raw materials.
So like a lot of things to do with, I think, food manufacture, it's, as you say, it's complex and it needs careful management and consideration. And as you say, very much relating to the culture in the business. Okay, do you have anything else before I close today, Estelle or Felix?
I think we've covered quite a bit. I think I'm okay.
Well, thank you both very much for your very comprehensive presentations. I think we've answered all the questions, but we did put the details of the speakers on the screen. I don't know if we can put that, there we go, put that back up again. If you need to contact Felix or Estelle.
Close.
We will share a recording of the webinar to everyone who attended via email, and it will also be on our online webinar hub. So as I said, please, before you go, fill in our short survey. We'd just like to know how people found the event and any suggestions for future events. So thank you again very much to Felix and Estelle and for everyone attended. And thank you to Klüber for sponsoring this webinar. So thank you, goodbye, and have a good day.
Thank you. Best regards to all around the world. Ciao.